Oh, howdy, hi everybody. Sam Goodman of the HOP Nerd LLC and the HOP Nerd podcast. I'm excited to let you know that we're bringing you another video episode. This episode with the amazing Ray Gonzalez. I'm trying my best to get these videos to you. That's a little bit of a feat. If you can't tell, I am not home. I'm not back home in the office in the studio, but I'm trying my best to piece these little things together so we can get them to you on YouTube. As always, you can find the audio only episodes over on the website, thehopnerd.com. Just click podcast. You can also find it most places that you listen to podcasts. You know that last week we did an in-person pod with my amazing friend Heather Hayes. This one is a little different because me and Ray, we did this virtually, but it's an amazing, amazing episode. And I think you'll enjoy listening to it, or in this case, watching it. It was an absolute awesome time just getting to spend a bit of time with Ray talking about hop and all kinds of other things. It was just a really, really, really fun conversation. And as always, if you need a hand on your human and organizational performance journey, get in touch at thehopnerd@gmail.com, or you can head over to the website, www.thehopnerd.com, to learn more about what we do. And do me a favor, if you really like these video episodes, if you want to see me keep making these video episodes, do me a favor and make sure you click subscribe. Make sure you share. Make sure you tell your friends about it. I mean, unless you hate it, you can tell your frenemies or your enemies about it. But here we go. Episode 328 of the Hop Nerd podcast featuring Ray Gonzalez.
It's no fun when you get all the way through one of these really, really awesome conversations. And it's always like this. It's always the good ones, right? You get all the way through the end and you're like, man, that was the freaking best. That was the best. And then you go to look for your file and you go, crap, I forgot to hit record. A good conversation, whether recorded or not, is still pretty worthwhile, though. It's nice if you're a podcaster, though, to actually get it on some tape.
I agree. Yes. Well, good morning and cheers to your cold brew. I've got mine here because I did this only in honor of you. I don't normally drink cold brew. I drink hot coffee.
Okay.
But I said, you know what? I'm going to talk to Sam. I'm going to join the team. So
I love it. So, I'm not an anti-hot coffee person, but and I was always a hot coffee person. And then I lived in Phoenix long enough to where it was just there's not many days when you're like, man, I'm really craving a piping hot cup of coffee. Right, there's just not too many days where I have that. But here, I will show you. I will show you that today is pretty interesting. This Friday, I'm celebrating. We're doing a podcast and everything, and again, it's Friday, the most important day of the week. So I actually have two.
Double fisted today. All right, I got you.
What that really means is that I had a lot of stuff that compiled to the end of the week, and I need extra caffeine to get it all done before Friday's over.
I got you. I know what that's like. Yes, sir.
Well, welcome, Ray. Thanks for being here, man. And if you didn't realize, I just jump into these things, so there's no
problem. I'm all for it. I'm ready to go. I've been listening to your recent podcast. Really enjoyed the series on Back to the Basics. Thank you very much for that. Also, looked at your Starting Point app. What a great set of questions, Sam. Thank you so much for sharing that with the community. I think that's wonderful. I think a perfect application from a management perspective is for those managers who like to do management by walking around. You ever heard that phrase? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a big difference between that and observations.
Right.
But it's perfect for management by walking around. Observations are a whole nother animal, and that's kind of my specialty. I love talking about coaching to enhance performance. We even wrote a book on it, so, but besides that, I think those questions are perfect. Great starter questions, great 1-minute hop introductions, great tailboard discussions. Thank you very much.
And they always surprise me, right? Because I spend a lot of time, especially in workshops, talking about better questions, more interesting questions, right? Mm-hmm. And in particular, questions that just tap into, I'll use the fancy pants word and call it operational reality. But I guess what we're really saying is just normal, everyday, usually successful work. Like, how do we tap into that? That's always the question, right?
Right.
It's I don't know that it is easier, but at least it feels easier after things go wrong. We've got this big, loud, glaring signal that we should probably go ask some interesting questions, right? But it's that old question that we all kick around, right? What's happening when nothing's happening? What's going on? We're doing great. Let's go learn. The answer to that question I almost always find is a lot. There's a lot happening when air quotes here. Nothing is happening, right? And so those questions started out as just a bit of an idea of like, well, how do we make it starting, right? Just a starting point. How do we encourage folks to go ask a better question and then lean into their curiosity and then follow that kind of golden thread of curiosity and not make them pretty broad, right? And get them to understand that these aren't the questions. They are some questions that can help you get started. And I've just always been surprised, especially from the leaders that use those. They always pull me to the side and they're like, holy crap, these things, they're fun too. They're fun and they're helpful. And it's exactly what you just said. They're pulling them out and they're going, I'm going to go out. I'm spending time in the field. Okay, let me just pick one at random. Oh, that's cool. I'm going to go talk about that. Or using them during the beginnings of their team meetings. I know I've been getting a lot from our other HOP practitioner friends that are out there using them in workshops. And that's where I use them mostly, right? I'll use them in workshops. I'll pair people up and just be like, here, no rules, just learn something from each other.
Yeah.
And it's just cool. So thank you. That means a ton. That means a ton. I'm working for anybody out there listening on it. We're working on the Real Deal app in the App Store. Back to my double coffees here on Friday. I've got another screen up here with an app developer that I'll be going back and forth with for the next 12 hours of trying to get this in the App Store in Apple and Google Play, which I'm going to tell you, Ray, for a hillbilly like me, it's kind of a big feat. I don't know what the heck this person's talking about, but it seems to be working.
Yeah, that's why we have tech guys, right? I've got one too. I lean on quite a bit. He's a great guy. Teamed up with him to form a particular company called High Reliability Training.
Yeah.
For online video-based training, and his name is Daniel Wildler. So
nice.
He has a company called Safety Instruct. It's all compliance safety based training along with HR training and other stuff. He has a huge library.
That's amazing.
Some great stuff. And he said he needed to get into the HOP area, and so he reached out to us at Hope Consulting, and we were able to team up and form High Reliability Training. So yeah, we all need a tech guy. He's my tech guy. I ask him questions all the time because he's the one that I lean on for that. But,
I dabble. I dabble. I like to consider myself somewhat hip on some of the tech stuff, right? AI is a whole nother monster for me. I'm just like, I want no part of that. I have no clue what's happening there. If I don't understand it, you're right, I can't wrap my head around it. But everything else, I joke with people, I can make you a wonderful video. I can edit a wonderful video, wonderful podcast. I can do color grading on photos and videos, and I can set up lights and camera. I can do all that stuff. It's fun. I can run live pro sound. I can do any of that stuff. And most of what you do on the computer. But as soon as you get into, you need to actually write code from scratch for this.
Forget it.
That, no way. And then on the other side of that, PowerPoint slides. I'm like the world's worst.
Yeah. It can be tough. Yeah, I hear you. There's definitely an art to that for sure.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Recently, listening to your podcast, I understand too that you're running a new series. I forget, is it called like Sidebar, just for people to get to know who we're speaking to and all?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to spring that on you towards the end of the day. So anybody lives, we're technically in the main podcast right now. And then at some point, I'm going to switch it over and ask you a bunch of wonky questions that have nothing to do.
That's fine. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so we landed on the sideshow because it is a bit of a sideshow.
Okay. Sidebar. I couldn't remember. Yeah.
Sidebar sounds way too professional for around here. Right? Well, with that being said, you mentioned a couple things that you have going on, but let's maybe rewind a little bit and start with who you are, what you do, and kind of how you got into doing what you're doing. Who is Ray? Let's maybe start there.
Well, I got into commercial nuclear power as my career, and what was going on was the University of Memphis, which back then was called Memphis State University, had a Center for Nuclear Studies that you could go through. And I attended that, got through it well, and got hired on by Comanche Peak back in the day, 1980. Okay, so I've been doing this for 44 years. Of course, I was only 4 years old when I started, but that's beside the point. Anyhow, so yeah, I started there. I went the operator track. There was 2 tracks. I could have gone health physics, or I could have gone operations. I went operations, and that's where I kind of started my career. So I did in-house utility work for a couple of different utilities, 3 different ones before I started consulting. I did that for 29 years. Licensed in the control room initially at Comanche Peak. I was one of the first. I was in the very first license class, and then I moved on to other things. I moved on to quality assurance, operations training, and eventually at the South Texas project, which is the other power plant here in Texas, and that's where I'm coming from. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I worked out in South Texas, and there, I was the human performance coordinator. I got introduced into, human performance as an operator back in the late 80s when IMPO first released the first bits of human performance information. Really crazy stuff, that they put out initially for all of us to understand. And I really didn't understand it then as an operator. I mean, I kind of wondered, what does human performance have to do with running a power plant? I thought it was going to sound kind of touchy, feely stuff or whatever. I didn't know. But as the years passed, one of my great friends and mentors, Rob Fisher, I worked with him at South Texas. And he came to me as one of the on-site facilitators at South Texas to ask me to facilitate the first human performance day that we were going to have for my group. So that's when I was handed a package. I read it. I was very intrigued. I was already a kind of a study of human nature anyway. I mean, I love to learn. It's my favorite hobby. I learn something new every single day. My morning starts with coffee and a book. I go through, actually, I usually have 2 or 3 books open and read a couple of chapters or 3 chapters and one in each book every morning just to learn something. But that package with human performance information intrigued me. I jumped on it, and I've been a fan and been passionate about human performance, and now it's so much bigger. I mean, when we talk about high reliability operations or organizing, we're looking at an envelope that covers human performance and safety. And I'll tell you what, I'm so proud that after 29 years of utility work, I launched my own business. That's where I started HOP Consulting. HOP is the acronym for Human and Organizational Performance Enhancement. One reason why I named it HOP. The other reason is for the word. And I'll tell you that it's after launching that kind of with a hope and a prayer, literally, every pun intended. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. And the reason I did that, since you asked how I got into it, is because over the course of those years as a coordinator or a human performance manager at one facility that I worked at, people were telling me, hey, when are you going to get out there and share with more people, not just with one utility? So my peers, I had grown a large network. I was regularly attending human performance conferences. Back in the day, the HPRCT was the conference that we all went to. Did that for so many years. It's now called COLA, Community of Human and Organizational Learning. And, so I've been with that. I grew a network, and I decided to, okay, on a hope and a prayer, I'll start consulting. And that's how I branched out. And I tell you, I've been very lucky. Some say would be blessed, to be busy. Throughout that whole time, I've been as busy as I ever wanted to be up until COVID hit. And so it was a good thing that Daniel Wilder reached out to us so that we could create some online video-based training for people to have either in-person, consulting and training, or can do it remotely. So I've been very lucky, and that's kind of a quick and short story about where I came from.
No, I absolutely love it. I've got to tell you something that really resonates with me in particular is your hope and a prayer. anyone out there that takes that leap, I mean, hats off to you because that's scary. That's a scary jump. What is it? It's what's the old saying? I can't remember the guy who said this, the quote, but it's jumping off a cliff and trying to assemble a parachute or a boat or a plane or something on the way down. Right?
Yeah, yeah, I know. Sometimes it feels that way, right? Well, it took 29 years for me to decide to find, and I'll tell you, looking back at it, I kind of kicked myself for not starting sooner. I really should have started sooner
Yeah.
because I've been able to reach out to so many. We've been very lucky to help so many clients, and I know that what we do every day is saving lives and livelihoods. So, I'm amongst fellow practitioners. I mean, I'm doing what you folks do. We're saving lives and livelihoods every day, but that's our mantra. That's what we talk about, and we look at that from two different perspectives, right? You're saving lives. Well, that's a safety, concern, right? Personal safety. But along with personal safety, if you maintain good safety, then there's no issues for the environment. There's no issues against the company's brand. There's no issues with damaging assets or resources at the company brand. So that's maintaining the work, the livelihood.
Yeah.
When you look at human performance, it's all about the quality of work, minimizing errors that can lead to undesirable events, right? It's the quality of the work. And if the quality is strong, then the reliability is there. We can produce services and products and all reliably, and that's the livelihood. So what we do is we save lives and livelihoods. And I'll tell you, I kick myself for not starting sooner because we could have helped so many more. And I want to continue that journey. And although, people ask me, when are you going to retire? I tell them, well, I don't know. You're going to have to, get a hook and pull me off the stage, when I'm drilling on myself or something, because right now I'm just too passionate. I love what I do. And as long as I can continue to help people, I'll be out there working on it.
Well, I tend to think about that too, right? If your brain always goes to, well, what happens, when I get towards the end of this thing? What does that actually look like? Or your brain should, right? Your brain should be going there. But I think it falls more into. I'll see how this feels to you. But I know when I think about that, and many folks in our world, there is such a passion around what we do. There is such a passion and purpose, and I don't have a bit of problem waking up in the mornings because I'm excited to do what I'm going to do. Right? It's to your point exactly. Right? Putting that bit of a positive dent in the world means something, and it feels good, and all that comes together. So when I personally think of, well, what does that look like when I don't want to sit on a cruise ship for 7 months out of the year,
right?
As much as I might enjoy a cruise ship, I don't want to do that for 7 months out of the year. I think you kind of see that modern definition of retirement emerging, especially around our professions, where it's like retirement truly means now. It doesn't mean not doing it. It just means doing it only when I want to. Exactly at the times, maybe in a more limited scope, just less of it maybe. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know when I'm going to retire. And when I do, yes, of course, I would love to travel, me and my sweetheart, go do the things we want to do and just enjoy life. And we'll be prepared for that. But at the same time, I love to learn. So I may just be doing other things, and I've written one book already. Maybe I'll write some more.
You go.
Give me something to do. So.
I find myself just being truly a nerd for work. And I mean, as we go and spend time with organizations, right, just getting to learn about what people do, the amazing work that people do, it blows your mind, right? I don't know that I could ever stop wanting to do that. Fortunately, in a professional capacity, I get to do that. I get to study work, which is just neat, right? To learn more. But it's always amazing to me. It doesn't matter whether I'm on some type of production line somewhere in some manufacturing facility somewhere. Or I remember the first time we're talking a bit about commercial nuclear generation. When you walk into that turbine deck for the first time, for me, it was the turbine deck. When you walk onto the turbine deck of a nuclear power plant or any other type of power plant of any scope, scale, or size, right? And you go, holy crap, this should have never been here. We made this. How did we? What? I don't know that I could ever give up that excitement of going and learning more about what people do, because it just blows my mind. It just blows my mind.
How can these pumps be so big? That's one of the first things that struck me. Like, oh my gosh, this is a pump?
Yeah, this circular pump's the size of my house.
Yeah, it's like, wow, that was just amazing to me. Yeah, of course, I did not come from a Navy nuke background. Mm-hmm. Many of my peers did, which I thank them for their service. Yeah. And I had to grow up really fast because Navy nukes, They're a unique brand of people. So
Love them, love them, love them to death. Absolutely, because I worked with many of them too. But I remember the first time that I was really exposed to a majority group, or it's like everybody's Navy nuke and I'm not. I'm like,
yeah,
crap, what did I get myself into?
yeah. I had to make sure
I quickly fell in love with them. Right, they're amazing.
Yeah.
They are absolutely amazing.
Well, they're used to seeing this large equipment and all these things put together. That's where they had the huge advantage over me,
Yep.
in that they knew how these systems work together and fit and all that good stuff. They had seen the practical applications. I'd only gone to school,
Yep.
and done some things, and yet I was still successful. One of 3 people to pass the very first reactor operator license exam.
That's
there was
cool.
10 of us that took it. 2 of us were university, training kind of background, and the other 8 were Navy nukes. The both of us that went through the university passed the test, and many of the Navy nukes, only one of them passed out of 10. So it's like well, we held our own, and that I was very proud of that.
Yeah.
And we learned as we went on. We learned about all the practicalities as we went. So great stuff. All good.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you guys were recently in Australia, right?
Yeah. We
In Bris Vegas. You guys were in Bris Vegas?
Yeah, Brisbane. Yeah. What a beautiful city. I mean, and what a beautiful people and culture they have there.
Yeah.
We met we just lucked out. We connected with some great guys. So the backstory is, we do annual business meetings, and last year we had just launched our, partnered up and launched our first, joint venture business, high reliability training. Yeah. And since we had just started, we went on our annual business meeting with the family to Carefree, Arizona, just north of where you live.
Just right up the road. Yeah.
And what a beautiful area. We enjoyed ourselves quite a bit. But I told my partners that, hey, next year we're going to go to Fiji.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
We're going to do better. We're going to go to Fiji and really.
If you get to choose,
if
you get to choose, you might as well choose. Look, nothing against Carefree. Carefree is beautiful. There are plenty of hot air balloons to take a look at. And it's wonderful the right time of the year. But I'm choosing Fiji.
So I had my sights on that, and the partners said, well, since we're going to be over on that side of the world, why don't we see if we can connect with some like-minded people in Australia, put on a workshop while we're there.
You're 97% there, right?
Yeah. I mean, really, literally.
Yeah.
And then another partner says, well, hey, I heard Tahiti was pretty good. I said, okay, so that's what we ended up doing. We took off. We connected with some great folks like Josh Bryant, and Steve Harvey, and Jody Goodall, and Georgina Poole. We connected with these folks to help us get ourselves organized and started to kick off a 2-day HRO in action workshop.
Yeah.
And we had good attendance. We had a great experience, lots of good shared learning with everyone. And then once we left Brisbane, we flew to Fiji, spent 4 days there, flew to Tahiti, spent 5 days there, then flew back to the States, through LA and back to DFW. So, it was quite something.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed that. But we've made some great friends in Australia, and we're still connected, and we're hoping to continue to be connected with them. Yeah. I've even had personal conversations with the attendees at the conference. It doesn't always have to be work. It's all about building relationships.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. And I can't say enough positive things about that group of folks down there. There's just so many amazing individuals, like you said. I mean, even if you just look at what Steve and them have going on with the Safety Differently book club in Brisbane, I mean, it's just amazing. It's absolutely amazing that the work that they've got going on, and just giving back to the community. Again, I can't say enough positive things about what they've got going on down there. But your point on the community is one thing that I harp on all the freaking time.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell you, Ray, as contrary to popular belief, I don't really like the internet. Like, I would much rather not be on the internet, right? I limit my interactions on social media. It's a part of the modern business landscape, though. You can't not interact on social media.
Yeah.
But the one thing, as I started playing in that space more than a handful of years back now, especially with YouTube and LinkedIn and this and that and the other, and trying to provide value with free videos and resources and just getting stuff out in the community, stuff that we recognize now over the past, maybe 4 or 5 years, there are far more resources today than what there ever were when we were first starting to tinker with these ideas.
Yeah.
Right? You think about going down the Google rabbit hole with something like human and organizational performance or safety differently or safety 2 or whatever we want to call this stuff. You tried that 5 years ago, you'd find basically nothing. And nowadays, I mean, other than maybe an obscure research paper here or there, or if you were fortunate, you would get one of Todd's books, right? And then you blow your mind when you read it, right? You kind of go down that path. But it's cool. It's cool to see all those resources and all those things kind of happening now. But the thing that I absolutely love about it, the thing that I love more than anything else, is once starting really in that space of putting stuff out there, starting the podcast and doing all those different things, meeting folks like Steve and Josh and on in Brisbane and well beyond, obviously here in the States and all over the world, my genuine friends list has grown. Not like your online friends list, but like genuine friends, to where when you meet up with folks, I just met up with Murray Ritchie just the other day. Was here in Arizona, and I'm like, and I've done this like multiple times because I tell people, like, if you're around or you see that I'm in your town, let me know. Like, let's go have coffee, let's hang out. You meet these folks, and you're like, man, oh man, like I know that we're just now meeting face to face, but it feels like I have known you for the past 15 years. It feels like we used to work together or something. Like, I don't know.
Right.
It's the best. It's the best of bringing our worlds together.
Keep that in mind, because I'll be flying through Phoenix here on Friday, October 4th, if you're available. I can rearrange my flight times, and maybe we could do lunch.
I'm pulling up my calendar right now, Ray. I'm
Friday,
looking.
October 4th. Yes, sir.
I'm here on October 4th because that is a Friday. Yeah, that's a Friday.
Yes.
That's a Friday, because it had me worried for just a second, because we're doing a workshop in Vegas the following week.
I know. I saw that.
But I'm like, ooh, I've got a couple days. So no pressure, but if you get a bit of time here, you get enough time to leave the airport, let me know. I'll swing by, pick you up, and we'll grab some lunch downtown near the airport, and I can drop you right back off.
Yep. It gives me a good reason to shift my flight, push it out a little bit further, because it was a short turnaround anyway. So I said, wait a minute. Sam's always talking about if you're in the area. So I said, okay, let me look. So I'll do that. As soon as we get done, I'll do that. I'll shoot you a message and let you know what I've got set up.
Yeah, absolutely. Please. I tell people that because I publish it in our little newsletter that we put out, and I'm constantly adding, like, hey, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be there, or I'm going to be in Phoenix. And that's the biggest reason, right? A couple of reasons. The first being is, hey, if I'm around, let's hang out. The second being is, if you need a bit of help, I'm already there. Save both individuals involved some travel cost, if I'm already in your town.
Yeah.
But people always tend to be a bit shy, right? We're people, right? We tend to be a little bit shy. And then I'll get the message later where it's like, hey, I was in Phoenix, or I saw that you were in Chicago, or I saw that you were, here or there. And I wanted to reach out, but then I didn't want to impose. And I'm like, listen, I'm putting it out there. If I don't feel like, I'll tell you. I'll let you know. Yeah. But 99% of the time, unless I've just had a real bad day, we're going to at least go grab a cup of coffee. So I'd love to. If you can make it work, you just let me know. I will be here, and we will make it happen. And then everyone that's listening to this will get to see us post all kinds of fun selfies on.
There you go.
On LinkedIn.
I'm good with that. I do that anyway. My friends are always telling me, man, you guys go everywhere to go eat. My wife and I.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily foodies per se, but we love trying new venues and all of that.
No, I've noticed, because we've recently become Instagram buddies.
So
and I'm like, I'm going to have to start hitting Ray up for some restaurant recommendations.
If you're in Dallas Fort Worth, let me know. I'll tell you where there are some really good places to go. So yeah, absolutely. Hey, listen, before I forget though, one more shout out to Steve Harvey and Josh Bryant, because we were able to attend their book club. So my other partner, Ron Ferris, wrote a book with Tony Machera and Jim Marinas called Critical Steps.
Critical Steps,
right? Hopefully you have that and you've seen that.
Yeah.
So he wrote his book. I wrote mine on coaching to enhance performance. And we went on the book club to share thoughts and ideas about our books. And I'll tell you, it was such a great experience. We had so much fun. And it's laid back, kind of like this, very laid back. Steve is a great host. Josh, did all the coordination behind the scenes, and hopefully everybody got benefit out of that. So if you haven't seen that episode, it's pretty good, of us, talking with those folks.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I've got to get Tony and those folks over on this podcast at some point. It's always the podcast is the hard thing, right? It's always trying to coordinate times and figure out when, where, how.
Oh yeah.
But I've got a long list, and you're bringing those folks up. They are on my list of people that I have yet to email and say, hey, when you, but those guys are listening. Hey, let's have a cool. Let's do this. Let's do this too.
Yeah, you'll have a great time with Tony and Jim if you can get Jim on.
I've got a funny story. So I was in Calgary. I flew into Calgary. I was doing some work with a client in Alberta, and it was at the same time that, what's the conference they have over there? Banff? Is it the big
so.
Energy Safety Canada something? I think is what they do. And I think I'm hoping. So again, if Tony, if you are listening to this for some reason, let me know. Let me know if this is true. But it was at the same time. I was flying in, and I unfortunately didn't get a chance to drive over because I had a full week scheduled with this client. And I'm pretty sure I'd seen on the internet like Tony and those folks were there, and I'm leaving, and I'm going through the U.S. Customs line in Calgary, right? They do the pre-customs. That's always Calgary's smooth. I love that airport, nice and easy, get in and out of. And I'm 99% sure that I saw Tony in the line about a mile in front of me, where I couldn't get to him to say, "Hey, are you Tony?"
Right.
But so if you chat with him, ask him if he was there about a year ago. we were within about maybe 100 yards of each other.
All right. Yeah. Well, I mentioned Tony and Jim specifically, but I'm just assuming that you've got Ron Ferris on your list.
Absolutely.
My other business partner, because I'll tell you, you'll get a great interview, from Ron as well, and now I do know that he's going to be out for the next few weeks because he's an avid hunter and outdoorsman, so he's out to have a great trip and enjoy himself. So yeah.
I used to be, since I moved to Arizona, I've not quite got into it as much. I was always living in the East Coast in Virginia, hunting whitetail deer, that kind of in the mountains. I move out here. I'm in elk country now, and I have no clue how to hunt an elk, and no clue. And I have no clue how to do that in Arizona. So I have yet to educate myself. I've not got enough knowledge or information to convince myself to put in for a tag yet.
Yeah, right.
I understand. So here, and I'm sure it's not just here. I know many areas of the country where hunting is really a big deal. But here, the utility that I worked for here in Arizona, when you got into elk season, it was just kind of a stated fact. Like half the plant or half the group will be gone. For this 2 or 3 week period, there's no one around, just for hunting.
Yeah, we've worked with clients that have told us, okay, when it comes to the schedule, we're not going to be available for this time frame. I say, why is that? Well, it's hunting season. Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, okay.
Well, it starts to get weird. It starts to get weird because this will hit you right in your nuke feels. You're going to know exactly what I'm going to say. Hunting season is in the fall, and we usually have something very important happening.
Yeah, usually trumps that. Yeah,
in the fall.
Yeah, it's called an outage. You don't have any time for yourself for anything
Absolutely
else.
Absolutely not. No.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can understand.
Yeah, so tell me a bit more about Hope. What kind of clients do you work with? What kind of services do you normally provide to those clients? What does it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously I started in the commercial nuclear, so that's kind of where I launched. So a lot of work. I've been lucky to work with a lot of nukes, different place that's all electric power generation. But later, expanded into the other fossil fuels and wind. I've done some of that, as well as transmission and distribution. So I have quite a few folks there. So a lot of the electrical utilities been covered, but I've also worked with oil and gas, some major companies in oil and gas, chemical production. I've had a couple of government contracts for chemical weapons disposal facility. That was very unique. That was very interesting, Sam. You understand risk when you have to be trained how to don a mask in 10 seconds or less to be on site, right? In the field. So so did that. Other government contracts for Air Force research and other places, air base research. mining, and I tell you, I've dabbled a little bit here and there with medical. Here in my own community, I managed to get in with one of the university hospitals here, University of North Texas Health Science Center. They had an Institute for Patient Safety, so for a couple of years I was one of their associate fellows helping with medical and trying to help them understand. I tell you, medical's tough because they love academic stuff. Mm-hmm. I try to push them toward more practical application, and they are fearful. They need to branch out, have a bigger open mind about the practicality. They want all of this research and all of this other stuff before they start doing stuff, and yet they are one of the highest risks industries in the United States. So many people are being impacted negatively by errors in hospitals. So I want to continue that venture, and I have some, subject matter experts and others aligned for that. So hopefully we'll get into that. But we've been in manufacturing and other things, and I'll tell you what we do helps almost any industry, large or small companies. So I've been very lucky to get into various things. So,
that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. You're hitting on something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. We had a bit of a catch up, just getting to know each other before we jumped on this podcast, a couple of weeks ago or something like that, which was awesome. Yeah. We should have recorded that one too. We would have had two of these because that was a great conversation as well. Jeez. But you're hitting on something near and dear to my heart. It's something that we talked about there that I think is probably something interesting to explore a bit. Is exactly that. These approaches applied to a healthcare setting. Yeah. Because as we were kind of talking about before, I mean, it's needed, right? When I think about healthcare, and I have a bit of an intimate understanding, as you do too, lots of family that operate in that industry, lots of family that operate in leadership in that industry, and the more that I have to be cautious because it's close family. I don't want to just put on my hop hat and jump in. I've got to keep that separate a little bit at home, right? Yeah. But as you listen and you hear some of the struggles and some of the challenges around improvement in patient safety, employee safety, and beyond, right? Yeah. I think most of what we're talking about, we can easily throw the word on top of that of just operational excellence, right? Yeah. Yeah. When I hear a lot of the kind of challenges and struggles that they face, I'm just sitting there going, man, the amount that the things that we're talking about can help in this world, if you can ever get through that barrier of, as you said, practical application, but more importantly, bringing in those subject matter experts, because it's hard in a clinical setting if you don't have several of those credentials after your name. All right, so if you don't have MD, RN, on and on and on and on, they're like, who are you? Who are you again? Yeah. So I think that's an interesting subject to maybe chat a bit about because
we could do a whole podcast on that. I've got story after story after story about medical stuff that we could talk about. So maybe
I think that is the next step. That is the next move for excellence in healthcare. Yeah. Is that growth towards the concepts that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I'll leave you with this thought because we really ought to set this aside for a specific call. Yeah. I could do it. But I'll leave you with this thought because I truly believe this. If I had a crystal ball and I could look into the future, I believe that the healthcare industry is going to be leading the way in high reliability operations, organizations, HOP safety, etc.
Agreed.
Yeah. Because of the level of caliber of personnel that they have and their commitment for care, there's no doubt in my mind that eventually we're going to crack that code and they'll be leading the way and showing other industries how to be there. Right now, who are they benchmarking? They're benchmarking airlines, commercial nuclear power, aircraft flight operations, as the big three that were recommended back in 1997, in the To Err is Human report. Yeah. But in the future, I think they will be somebody that everyone else will be benchmarking to see how did they turn the patient safety equation around.
Agreed. Because I think about all of those things lumped together under that umbrella of what we tend to refer to as operational excellence, right? That I think that not only that, right, in patient safety and error reduction and minimization of outcome from errors that will occur and all the different things that we chat about, but then also in patient satisfaction, in efficiency, in cost, and profit, and all the things that are important to any business, whether that's healthcare or making candy bars, right?
Absolutely.
And everything in between, the things that we need to have to run as a successful organization.
Oh, yeah.
I'm right there with you. I think that once that little riddle gets solved, I think once you see a couple really embrace that and go down that path of like, we're doing things a bit differently and check out what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think it catches like wildfire pretty fast. And I'm excited for them when it happens.
Yeah. Well, you know what I think we need to do better is to help them understand the return on investment.
Agreed. Yeah.
So it is the bottom line. It is all about the bottom line. So when we help them understand that, that's always best. Obviously, that's for healthcare, but you've talked about this on your podcast many times. I always say this: when we start with new clients, we always start at the very top, the senior leaders. Mm-hmm. We gotta start with them, help them understand their roles and responsibilities for launching an initiative like this. And one of the things we need to talk to them and be very good at describing to them, is the return on investment, right? Helping them understand that if they make this effort and if they're committed and they're ready to reinforce these initiatives through constant communication, observation, and all the other things they're responsible for, coming up with the funds required, etc., keeping a finger on the pulse, making it important, because if it's important to them, it's important to everybody else. Yeah. So once they understand all that, then we're good to go. And I'll tell you, I think we just have to do a better job helping senior leaders get aligned, picking those senior leaders that are going to be our best allies to help us get moving forward and help them understand clearly what the return on investment is.
Absolutely. I agree. I think that's always something that we have to make very, very clear. Right, make it very, very clear. And not only that, I know a conversation that I end up having with leaders at varying levels in organizations, but especially senior leaders. One of the things with humanizing our approaches, just to put it kind of broadly, is that we start to create an environment in which learning is possible, right? Mm-hmm. Deep and meaningful operational learning is possible. Yeah. And the more that we consistently lead through those, we take that from being possible to likely. Right, that deep and meaningful operational learning is not just possible, now it's likely. And then as a leader, personally as a leader, and because a quote that always sticks out to me, it was a near and dear friend of mine, which is a site director for a plant. He was one of those individuals that when we first started having some of these conversations, it was, it's this touchy-feely crap. That kind of stuff, which then quickly later come back to, and I think this is some of that value statement that needs to be included. He said, I thought that this was touchy-feely crap, but I've had some of the rawest, realest, most meaningful conversations I've ever had in my life as a leader. And here's the value piece. As a leader, I don't need much. But one thing I do need is information. Yeah. I need real deal information. Yeah. Some of the value as a leader is that you have more information to make better operational decisions as a leader. There's not a bunch you need as a leader, but I need good information. And if I have good, sound information, I can make some pretty stinking great operational choices and decisions at a leadership level in our organization. I always found that to be powerful, and I think that is a piece of that value proposition, that not to oversimplify this, but as a leader, if I have more information, it makes my job easier. It makes my job far easier if I have plenty of good, sound information, because I'm not having to guess. I'm not having to lock myself in the office and scratch my head and go, what do we do with this problem? I'm surrounded by experts of what they do. When I can tap into that, I can do some pretty meaningful stuff.
Yeah. One of the traps senior leaders fall into is the fact that they're given information that others think they want to hear, not what they need to hear.
Right.
So, and then they can't distinguish the difference between they think they're getting real information. So, that's huge. That is huge.
And we see that, right? We see that especially in varying degrees, right? Based on the environment that the organization has created around learning and information sharing and things like that. We've all probably been either on the receiving end of that, and a lot of times on the delivery end of that, where something not great has occurred, or it's just not a pleasant something. And then, of course, I'm taking on this risk of bringing this information up the chain, and I'm having to kind of filter and sort based on the personality that I'm going to end up sharing this information with. We see that in maybe even our little event blurbs that we send out, right, in our facilities. where it's like, I don't know, should we? Let's maybe soften that side of it up just a little bit. I know how that, but they don't put the word. One of my favorite examples of this, Ray. This is a real story. We had and I've shared this, so anybody that's heard this 1,000 times, I apologize, but it's just such a great example of it. We were basically doing a stack extension on a plant on a gas turbine, right? Stack extension. And so you got to whack off the top of that and put a new piece on top, right? So you've got to art gouge a bunch of stuff. And so engineering, all this stuff, they go and they mark it all up, marking paint, so there's cans of marking paint. They walk it down, check it again, triple check it. Can't find any cans of marking paint. Everything's clean. We're ready to art gouge this. We've already got all of our rigging points welded on, engineered. It's ready to go. Let's do this. Person gets up there, goes through it, hits it with an art gouge, and then the webbing of one of those beams was hidden. A little can of marking paint that had rolled down. If it can go wrong, it will.
Yes.
Right? That's the rule of the universe. And had managed to like ping, 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 and then into one of those little webbings. Perfect. Right where it was to be marked or to be cut, and hit it, and it blew up. Right? A full PPE, no problem. I'm sure the person had to change their art gouge suit after it went off. But they were prepared for something like that. It was all fine and good, right? Great learning opportunity. Great learning opportunity. But even at that time, the notice that goes out, I remember I'm still working internal at this time. We're sitting in this meeting, and the conversation is, we cannot use the word explode. We cannot use that word. The senior leadership team are going to they're going to fall out of their chairs.
Right.
So I remember, this is like a strategic communication meeting now at this point, right? We're going, what if we put, I've got it, can rupture due to excessive temperature. It means the same thing, but it doesn't say hit with an art gouge and exploded. Right? So we have to, exactly. People will only bring us the information that we allow them to bring us.
Yeah.
And if the expectation has been in the past that I tend to maybe panic when you bring me some of this information, then people are going to start sorting and filtering. Really, filtering is probably the right word. Filtering. And it might be the same, but you might not get the full depth of what we're talking about. You might not get that level of detail that, as a senior leader, as a manager, as a director, that you really need. So back to our point, back to some of the value, is that you get more information to make better operational decisions. They hit a can with an art gouge and it blew up. It didn't rupture because of excessive heat. Here's the real story. But it is a risk. It's a risk that people have to take on to share that information upwards, which is important to acknowledge.
Yeah, and I'll say that sometimes also, kind of in line with this, we think we're communicating the right things and reinforcing the right things, and yet it's not working for us. Let me give you the classic example, because this is the second thing we've been very successful at, because we take a unique approach to this, just like we take a unique approach to observation and feedback. That's why I wrote the book. Yeah. And by the way, when we're done, I'll send you a link. People could download the first 2 chapters of the book for free. They'll know where to go to get it, etc. But what I want to talk about is stop work authority, right? So senior leaders say, they say, well, we give everybody stop work authority. They're comfortable in knowing that that's going to protect our people, the stop work authority. And yet giving people stop work authority is not enough. I do presentations on this regularly, because I'll tell you that workers do not stop for many, many different reasons. Now, let me just ask you and your listeners, think back to a time when you had to go investigate, an event, an undesirable event that happened, and you hear in an interview, you hear someone say, "Oh yeah, I saw that, but I didn't say anything because of X, Y, Z, because I'm an apprentice, or because he was a senior leader, or I didn't think they would listen to me, or we get in trouble if we stop work, or right? There's all kinds of reasons. So people are not using their stop work authority, although we think we're giving it to everyone. So that's huge. That's really huge. So what it boils down to is education and confidence for the workforce. They need to clearly know when they're standing in the space of uncertainty and it's time to stop. Right? They need to stop. So what we came up with years ago was visible cues I call triggers. Now, some people refer to triggers as error precursors or error traps. That's not what I'm talking about. Those are conditions of work. Visible triggers are things that you see visibly in front of you just before something bad's going to happen. And I discovered this when I was teaching a class on stopping when unsure. We were just teaching human performance tools, right?
Yeah.
We got to stopping when unsure, and an engineer asked me a question, stood up in front of the whole class and say, how do I stop when unsure if I don't know I'm unsure?
Yeah.
I thought to myself, Dadgum, leave it to an engineer. That's a great question. It's a great question. I did not have an answer to it at that time, but I stuck with it. And years later, I found it when I was when I was asked to assist on a root cause evaluation. And I was following their map. We were in the war room, so they had walls and walls of sticky notes with the timelines and all that. And I'm looking at all these things. They were doing actually a common cause root cause. So they're looking at many, many different events. And as I was looking through, I said, man, there is something here. There's something here. And I'm just, And I said, look, you've got a huge stack of reports right there. Can I take these back to the hotel room tonight? I'll bring them back in the morning. So I stayed up really late looking at all those things. And then I realized there were these visible cues staring an individual right in the face just before something bad could happen. And it was showing up like 90% of the time in the stack that I was looking at. So I went back and talked to them about it, et cetera. And then I went and did more research. At the time, I still had access to many people in the nuclear industry. So I asked for some OE, some operating experience. Please send me some information that you have. I continued to look at it. The numbers were high. Anywhere between 80, 90% of the time there was something. Because I'll tell you, the one good thing we do in the commercial nuclear business, if we do have an undesirable event, we will do a comprehensive evaluation, depending on the significance, right? But
and share. That's what's
amazing.
And share. And share. Back to
we share. But in those details, you can see what these visible triggers are. So that's where I came up with trigger training. Now, when people understand that, what it looks like, these things that are unexpected that show up, and they also understand these human nature drivers that cause us to proceed in the face of uncertainty, like time pressure or peer pressure or many other things. There are many other. When they understand those things, those are the things that really give them the confidence. And then on top of that, like we've been talking about senior leaders, when senior leaders support this effort, you see a lot of success, because now you've got senior leaders kicking off the class and saying, I will support you when you stop work because you see something unexpected. We're going to show you these visible triggers, what they look like, and we're going to talk to you and ask you to be mindful of those human nature drivers that push you to want to proceed, but you need to stop. So we've had a tremendous amount of success with that. That is a course that actually helps people put a finger in the dike when they're having problems. And I'll tell you, the only two human performance tools, quote, tools that are really talked about in that is questioning attitude and stop when unsure. Now, I don't believe questioning attitude is a tool. It is really human nature. But people tout it that way, so I'll talk to it that way. But anyhow, so it really doesn't matter what maturity level you are. We've seen people with a very low maturity level or understanding of HOP who have had a tremendous amount of success with trigger training. And then we've seen those that are very mature, that they're nukes that have had a tremendous, but never been exposed to trigger training, have a tremendous amount of success because it's a simple concept once they get it and they know they've got the support of the management staff, which does what? It improves psychological safety overall across the board in the organization, and they're willing to stop because they know they'll be supported to get the answers to the questions that they have when they see something unexpected. So I think that's just very important, and it's something that senior leaders need to be mindful of, because just because you think you have a stop work authority policy doesn't mean it's being used.
No, I love that, because I think that for a couple of reasons here. I think that it helps to answer some of that question, right? Because I think one of the fatal flaws that we see with stop work authority overall, at least what I see, we chat about this a bit throughout the community, is that as a person, usually by the time that when I recognize that I need to have stopped, it's really I should have stopped. Right. It's usually crap. Like I think about that personally. Anybody listening, all of us, we can think about that personally. And I'll speak to myself, so I can say that what I did was dumb because I'm talking about myself. Right. I'll do something that I'll look back and go, damn it, that was stupid. Right?
Yeah.
And I go, now I see where I probably should have not, right? That hindsight's always 2020, right? So the fact that it gives you some of those indicators and embeds those indicators because that's a question, right? Is how do I know when my level of uncertainty, because there's always some level of uncertainty to what we do in any action that we take every day. How do I know when that level of uncertainty gets to a point where it should become unacceptable to me? Right. So it sounds like that's answering some of that question. It's letting me know as an individual that, like, okay, like I'm doing work and I've got my blinders on as I should because I'm hyper focused on getting whatever this is done. This is giving me some of those cues, those triggers.
It is.
To then say, okay, and it helps him move from should have stopped to stop, which I think is a really valuable part of that conversation.
Absolutely it does. Yeah. How often do workers get faced with something they do not expect?
Yeah.
We're not talking about work as imagined here. We're talking about work as done in real time with real equipment, real systems that are not always running to the specs they need to. So how many times are they faced with the unexpected and yet may rationalize their way through it and continue on?
Yeah.
So
I really like that because it's interesting. It's very interesting because again, it helps to answer that question because we expect people to figure things out, but to what level? Like when does that go? My figuring is getting to the point of maybe just guessing, right? When does my innovation, right? Where's my bit of where's my rumble strip? That tells me that I'm getting. I always like to think of this in the highway analogy, right? With navigating the blue line, early warning and detection systems, rumble strips, triggers, right? And then around areas of critical risk, guardrails that are life-saving controls that we know tend to function even when we make mistakes. At least they don't cost us a life or a limb, right? So I really like the idea that fits into that equation. Again, just in my mind, I'm a very visual person. Where I have to be able to see things of almost that rumble strip of. This trigger, this is letting you know that you are probably getting too far outside of the beaten path, and you might have a good reason for that, and that might be okay. But this is the point to maybe stop and reevaluate that. We need to maybe understand if this is the right move, or if we need to bring it back into the lanes, into the 4 lanes or 5 lanes or 6 lanes, a little bit tighter, right? Which is interesting.
In our research for developing the course, I found out that those visible triggers fall into 4 categories. So the unexpected can come to you in different ways.
Right.
And so once you have knowledge of that and you know that again, it just gives you the confidence that okay, I need to stop now. I have seen something unexpected and I'll get the support I need.
Yeah.
That's what we need. If you want effective stop work authority, by all means, you need to help our people understand. Get them educated.
I like
get
it.
them sensitized to it.
And I think especially, something again that's kicked around in our broader community is just, I think stop work becomes far more effective when you couple that with safe to start.
Yeah.
Right. And that term kind of kicked around in our world of, a meaningful start when safe kind of something. Right. Which I find very interesting because it does help you to maybe provide some of those more, not only think through the work, right? When we think about what's the stuff that kills us, what controls do we need? Are those controls in place? Have we verified those controls? Those really basic questions that, many of our organizations might refer to as like a pre-task brief or a pre-job brief that I tend not to because in those processes, in many ways, we bloated them so far that they've become ineffective, right? I really like that basic start when safe model. What kills me? What's going to kill me, or what really matters to this work, whether that's nuclear safety, security, environmental quality, whatever that really big thing is for this work, or handful of big things, and what controls do we have around that? Even tying that into maybe recognizing when to stop. We know that when those controls are degraded or not in place, that's we can start before we stop, right? We can start before we get to the point of stopping, or when we get there and those things have moved on us or changed. We see those as big glaring beacons then. So I think you can bring all of that with those triggers and all that into a more well-rounded package, because I think stop work, at least in it's valuable in the way that you've described it with triggers and the way that we've talked about tying that into stop work can be powerful. But leaders do have to recognize that without all of that support and without all of that better information, without all of what we've talked about, it's not just an easy something that you throw out there and say, hey, just if you think you're going to get hurt, just don't.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
much more than that, right? I think
Yeah.
is probably where I'm landing on that.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say that from a senior leader perspective, if they are bought in, they launch trigger training, and after a month they say, "I'm not sure it's working. I'm not sure it's working. Hold on, it's been 3 months now. We're still having events. We're still having things, right? I'm not sure this is working." Well, my question is, how important is it to you?
Yeah.
How are you reinforcing it?
Yeah.
Did you take the class?
Yeah.
Do you understand the concepts, right? Because if you're not supporting it full-heartedly and making it important to your people, then it's not important to anybody else.
Right.
So, there's a huge responsibility amount there. And that's for any initiative, right, Sam? I mean, any initiative, if they really think it's important, it'll be important to everybody else.
Well, and I think it's also I think with those leaders and the organization overall, but as we said, leaders being kind of the beacon, right? The one that we're kind of looking to. I think it's having better assumptions around those tools, generally speaking, right? I spend a lot of time, as you do, and I've spent a lot of time teaching and being involved with, and even in my career in power utility, using error reducing tools, right? And they're valuable. Stop work, these falling into maybe some of this bucket, right? But this idea that leaders have to accept and understand that people are going to mostly get it right and they're going to sometimes get it wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So when the tool fails, because it's gonna, right, instead of freaking out and going, well, they should have stopped.
Yeah.
Or they should have just peer checked harder.
Yeah. Or self-checked. If they self-checked, is the answer to everything.
Understanding that, I mean, you would probably have more information on the percentage effectiveness of these tools than what I would. But it's not 100% because we're people, right? They help us to reduce these things and reduce them. Even if it's just 50%, I'll take 50%. That's pretty freaking good. Right. But understanding that the tools are going to let people down at some point for a varying amount of reasons. And when they do, instead of saying they should have, or they could have, or if only they would have, understanding more about the context and the situation, and saying, of course it let them down. We've uncovered that it let them down in this particular situation. What can we learn deeper than they should have used the tool harder? As I think when leaders start with that assumption, that more realistic assumption that people are going to mostly get it right, but they're going to sometimes get it wrong because people are going to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
it helps us to maybe curtail some of that reaction and helps us go more towards respond because we understand that. Yep.
Well, it's the dynamic working environment that you talk about often in your podcast, right? And you even mentioned it when this last series on the basics when you were talking about the HOP journey plan, right?
Yeah.
The HOP journey plan is not a set, hard and fast plan.
It's a plan that's not a plan.
It has to be a dynamic plan.
Yeah.
It has to be things that you're going to change and update. And I'll tell you, from a dynamic standpoint, not only is the equipment and the systems and the work environment very dynamic and ever changing, but the most dynamic thing is the individual worker. From the beginning of shift to the end of shift, they're changing. From one day to the next, they're changing. From 1 week to the next. I mean, we're dynamic, and we get it right most of the time. Everybody's going to have a bad day where they're just not 100%.
Yeah.
And that means you cannot rely on self-check or more peer checks or whatever. That we're human. We're fallible. We're going to have good days and bad.
Yeah, I share that with folks all the time. Is that I think that it never leaves you, Ray. I think when you spent far more time than I ever did in the nuclear world, but I spent a good little chunk. And I think that those tools, those approaches become deeply ingrained almost into your personality. Right? I'm a self-checker. I am. It's because I know that I screw things up a lot. I'm the person that's like, I call things out, I touch and verbalize, right? And I'm like, okay, keys, phone, wallet. Right. Now, I have some bad habits. It used to be skull, but it is nicotine pouches now. Nicotine. I'm good. I can go out of the house, right? And I still almost always get that right. And then occasionally I get to the car and go, well, I thought that was my keys. Those were not my keys. I think it's this better assumption. The way that I tend to try to describe it is that I think we have to really understand that our organizations are chocked full. The majority, 99.9% of the people that make up our work worlds are great people with great intentions, doing great work, creating mostly good outcomes. And if we understand, we keep that word mostly, we understand that, we start with good intentions. The people that we hire, the people that make up our work worlds, almost all of them, 99.9% of them are just good people with good intentions. Yeah. And they're out there doing great work on behalf of the organization, and they mostly get it right, and they occasionally get it wrong. Yeah. I think when we start there, it helps us to create that environment to where when we get that news that, hey, we got it a bit wrong, it becomes exactly that. We got it a bit wrong, not they got it a bit wrong. Yeah. We come together and we learn together, and we better understand those situations.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if we have time, there are a couple more things I wanted to chat about.
Let's hear it.
One of them is just some heads up so people don't fall into a trap when it comes to learning teams. Learning teams are a great way of learning. The curiosity, all of that, I support that 100%. The thing, there's a couple of traps that some organizations fall into, and I got to look back at us as practitioners or consultants or whatever, and how we're delivering it, how we're helping organizations understand. Too many times, once people have had learning team training, they believe and they start implementing it in a very reactive way. So when they have undesirable events, they're reacting to it and they're doing it there. Instead of taking a more proactive approach, which can be done, they're doing it
should be done too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's one trap, I think. And again, it may just be a misunderstanding. But the other thing is that, learning teams can be limited and can be limiting if it's only done in a classroom or meeting setting, where you do the evaluations, you come up with all the posters and the data and the detail and soak time and et cetera in a room. And what are you doing? You're thinking about work as imagined. You are describing work as imagined. As much as you want to get it right, those are all great ideas and stuff, but it's not necessarily work as done. Yeah. So don't confuse the aspects and the benefits of learning teams as opposed to the beneficial benefits that you can get from observing work in real time, with real equipment, real systems, and real responses from both the equipment and systems and from the personnel. Yeah. Because then you're able to do lots of things. I mean, there have been many times when I'm out training, coaching to enhance performance, we're doing the field practical part of the training, and I have stopped work. I see something, it's risky, it's dangerous, and I've stopped it, I've shut it down. So that intervention part is imperative, that we as the responsible people for observations, whether that's first line supervisors and above or whoever, we've got to be wholeheartedly in there watching work in real time with real responses. That's one huge benefit. But the other part is that in that real time, if you do it well, if you do it correctly, and you're not interfering, you're watching work being done, you're not getting told every step by the worker what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. If you're doing that, you're distracting them and you're losing it. You're not benefiting, you're not helping them any. You need to sit back like a fly on the wall, tell them just to do their thing. Don't interfere unless you have to intervene because something's wrong or risky. But otherwise, you take notes, capture all the wonderful things that they're doing, because there's going to be so many more of those than there are areas for improvement, or what we call takeaways. We call them takeaways because it's going to boil down to a conversation. It's a collaborative conversation we're going to have, to where I want you to take away these thoughts from this discussion, and those are the takeaways. We don't call them negatives, deltas, critiques, whatever. We call them takeaways when we give them feedback. But anyway, that to me is we got to be careful, because some people say, well, we take learning teams out in the field, and okay, but you're still walking around and you're kind of describing it. You're not necessarily, some of them are not necessarily watching it in real time with real responses.
Yeah, so I think there's all of what you said is highly important, and I agree with you. I agree with you completely on this. I think that there's a couple things there. The first one that I want to kind of pull out and highlight for folks. I think the first thing I want to say is that learning teams are a tool. And I highlight this consistently because I think it's important, and I want folks to really understand what I just said. Learning teams are a tool. I did not say learning teams are the tool. right? When we see things like learning teams, especially when they feel a bit new, which the concept of learning teams are not new, right? we
Right.
might be applying those to a different specific set of groundwork a different set of assumptions and beliefs, right? And maybe some of the ways that we approach those things. But the concept of involving those nearest to the work to co-design what work should look like is not a new concept, right? It might feel new to many of our organizations, and it might be new to many of our organizations, but it is not all that new. But it is a tool in our tool belt of
Right.
ways of operationally learning and improving. And what I would say, to your point, of discovering operational reality,
Right.
that's a key factor to this conversation. Yep, we have work as imagined, sure. But work as imagined, uninformed of operational reality is just best guesses, right? That's just a best guess. And we hope an educated guess, but just a best guess.
Yeah,
So I think
it's
that's
good.
probably the starting point that I want folks to recognize is that when we talk about learning teams, anyone that I would send your way, or me, or I'm sure even you, Ray, when you go and you have that conversation, I can't think of anybody that I would spend time with that are going to tell you that just do learning teams, forget everything else.
Yeah.
Like wait a second, this is not all this and none of that or none of this and that. This is a bit of a buffet. You need to use the tools that work well for your organization in your particular organization's context.
Exactly.
Right? So learning teams, I believe, are a very valuable tool. Moving on to maybe the next point of that, or a very, very valuable tool in that toolbox. Again, it is a toolbox. You don't just buy a hammer and say, now everything's a nail.
Right.
If you're like me and you like tools, even if you're not great at using them anymore, I have a little bit of everything because I know that I might need it at some point.
Right.
The next point that you made, which I think is hugely important, is that if you're not doing learning teams and you're getting ready to start doing learning teams, the first thing that I would tell you is not to do them after an event.
Right.
That probably to some folks are going to go, what do you mean don't do them after? That's not the place to learn, number one. Number two, you probably already have very robust, maybe not perfect, maybe not even great, but you already have tools and mechanisms designed to learn post-event. You have incident investigation. You might do some type of causal analysis. You've already got that stuff there.
Sure.
And it's probably functioning somewhat well for you. And if it's not, you wouldn't be doing it, right? It's there.
Yeah.
I would encourage folks to use learning teams at least at the beginning of their journey, almost exclusively for learning about normal everyday work, looking for starting points.
Exactly.
And then those learning rich starting points, because you shouldn't do them for everything. You got to use them where they count. Things that feel like there's more to learn here. This is error intolerant. There's some brittleness here.
Yeah.
We might not have seen an event yet, using them to tap into normal everyday work, which is the most untapped resource in our organization, or learning opportunity in our organizations. It's back to some of what we were saying before. Work goes almost always right. How? Let's learn more there.
Well, taking that approach is proactive.
It's proactive, absolutely.
Proactive approach. Yes.
If you think about it, even just from an amount of data standpoint, unintended operational surprises are anomalies. And if we just invest our time into understanding anomalies, we're missing the boat because the anomalies are anomalies. They're the outliers, right? We should learn about those. We should learn deeply about those. But our organizations already do kind of a stinking good job of that, because I know that we do, because when something goes wrong, suddenly everyone's calendar is clear.
Yeah.
Suddenly all the resources are available to us. Suddenly we anything you need, you just tell me, let's understand it. We should be, in my mind, we should be investing at least an equal part into learning about what's happening when nothing is happening, about learning about normal everyday work. Because as we said, I think the answer to that question is a lot. It's almost always a lot. I think it probably always is a lot. But I think you start there. In my world, and I think it goes really key with what you're talking about with meaningful observations, right? And for folks listening, I would encourage them to probably add maybe something that sounds like operational curiosity and well-intended field observations, where it's the can you teach me, can you show me? It's like, I'm sure kind of in the same vein of what we're talking about here, just discovering the reality of normal everyday work in real time, right? I think is a very important part to add there. And
you can do that.
You
do
can.
that. It's
You can.
Good observation, but you need to be careful about when you do that. It
Mm-hmm.
needs to be during the feedback process time, not during work.
Not during work.
Do
Yeah.
not interrupt them while they're doing their work.
I think it's not funny, but I'm going to use the word funny. But you think about that in our backgrounds, right? You think about like scheduled observations in particular, somewhat scheduled observations.
Yeah,
It's
I got you.
holy crap, we're doing something big, scary, critical.
Yeah.
Every leader is on the floor, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's horrible or bad, but what about everything else? We think about that. That's a common thing that we see. Is well, wait a second, like all that big, scary. When we were doing that turbine lift, like nothing bad's happened there because everybody like we planned this to the T, and we've spent months planning this evolution, and we have. But what about everything else? What about just normal everyday stuff, right?
That's
kind
when
of normal.
stuff happens.
That's where stuff
That's
happens,
when-
or normal
yeah.
operations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. We tend to do. We tend to do this thing that we came up with called learning explorations. And to describe that kind of quickly to you is the rapid improvements, and not just rapid improvements, rapid learnings. To kind of give a bit of an answer to that question, which I think goes hand in hand with observations, as we were just talking. This idea of kind of more hit and run, operationally curious, focused explorations where I don't know, like I'm not sure that this is a learning team or this area is ripe with operational learning, but my spidey senses are my neeners are going off a little bit, right? And I feel like there's something to learn more there. Going out and spending time, maybe not in a direct observation sense, but with those nearest to the work in a very, not a do this session this day, do another, none of that, but just going out and asking better questions and then listening, right? Listening for some of those things that we know tend to tell us that there's much more to learn here. There's what we tend to refer to as faint signals, right? Where it's, that thing, we figured that thing. It just never works right. Though. When I press that button, it's supposed to do that, but 50-50 chance it might not do that. Those kind of things. And we use those kind of hit and run learning explorations to work with those nearest to the work to here's the improvement. Or on the other side of that, to say there's something deeper here. Let's divert this to a more formal learning team, or to some other learning tool that we have within our organization. Right? I'm the last person that's going to tell you that a root cause is the devil. There's some people in our world that are going to tell you that the root cause it just needs to be burned and thrown away, and it's basically the spawn of Satan. And I don't agree with that.
I don't either.
I think this stuff, when applied with better beliefs and assumptions, whether we're talking root cause, learning teams, observations, learning explorations, and kind of on, I think when we start with the right assumptions, the right underlying beliefs, I think they can all be valuable to us in different ways. They're just tools, and they can all tend to play nicely together when we have the right underlying beliefs and assumptions.
Yeah. Well, the rapid learning that you just described kind of touches on what the third tool was that we mentioned was something similar to management by walking around.
Yeah.
That's a perfect opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily an observation.
Yeah.
It is a discussion.
It's a discussion.
You can have those discussions out there, and it's just another tool in your tool
It's just
belt.
another tool.
But the important thing for me is too many times what we have seen is that management loses focus on the old tried and true observation feedback process.
Yeah.
It's not just first line supervisors, although bless their hearts, they're working so hard. They've got so much administrative burden. One of the biggest excuses is I don't have time to get out there.
I say it every time, right? And I have to say it again, that in my opinion, frontline leaders have the hardest job in our organizations. I just have to throw it out there. I say it every time I have to.
They do. And management above that needs to figure out ways to help them get out in the field and have that leadership presence there so that they can do these observations to determine, well, what we discuss in the tailboard or the pre-job brief or the huddle or whatever you want to call it, is it being applied out there? I mean, it's an eye opener. I have been with supervisors in the field after their pre-job briefs. We've gone out to take a look at what's going on, and things are so different than what they talked about that the supervisor has stopped the work and said, hold on, let's regroup, we're going back. And they wants to find out. And I said, if we had not been out there, they probably would have been successful, but you'd have never known how they got there.
Yeah.
You'd have never known it. So, I mean, this is such a valuable tool that we are
Yeah.
dropping. And it's not just the responsibility of the first line supervisor. It is the responsibility of management all the way up to the top to ensure that we are observing real work in real time
Yeah.
under real circumstances.
Well, I tend to see, and I share this a lot, and this ties directly into when we're talking about the application of any operational learning tool pre-event. Because as we said, post-event, suddenly our calendars are clear. We know, right? Because you've done it, I've done it, we've all done it. If you've remotely lived in any kind of world that we've described so far, you've got the call where it says, "Hey, I know that you had a lot of plans this week, but you're going to West Virginia," right? All of a sudden, I don't care what hotel you stay in. You can eat steak every night. I don't care, but you're going because this happened.
Oh, thanks.
I had one of those happen not too long, which I was going anyways because it was a you know how our utility worlds are that we work in directly. You know everybody. And pretty significant events. So I'm going. I'm going to have to cancel vacation to go, but I know this person for one, and it's my organization. I'm going. But I remember that because I'm like, if I'm going, I'm staying in the fancy pants hotel because nothing else is available. Wink, wink. Yeah, everything's free, right? All of a sudden, everything's free. Where I was going with this is that pre-event learning side of things. Whether we're talking observations, whether we're talking about the way that we apply that kind of hit and run learning team model through a learning exploration, whether we're just talking about, I get a lot of questions. I spend a lot of time, as we mentioned, the cards. When you start talking about operationally curious questions, people start talking to you about being operationally curious. How do we make our leaders be operationally curious, right? And I think my answer to whether we're talking observations, learning explorations, pre-event learning teams, or anything there, you cannot just will things into existence.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. As much as we wish our work worlds were just wave the wand, tell people to do stuff, and they just magically go do stuff, it doesn't work that way, especially when we're talking in any role, but especially as we've been kind of highlighting with frontline leaders and mid-level leaders, they're stinking busy. If you want these things to happen as a senior leader in the organization, you can't just say go do it because they're already stinking busy. You have to physically carve out the time and space for it to happen.
Absolutely.
Of course, I can help you to prioritize these things. But one of the ways that I really more meaningfully help you prioritize these things is to clear enough space literally on your calendar for you to be able to actually go do them.
Yep.
If you look at our calendars, look at frontline leaders' calendars, look at anybody's work calendar nowadays. I mean, it is boom, 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 boom. And especially if you're a frontline supervisor, frontline leader. Because not only do you have, hey, I'm got to lead this crew of people, crews that are usually growing in size with less and less leadership, as we see kind of in modern times. So I might have 100 direct reports, and I want to at least touch half of them today, right? I want to at least go spend time with half of them, but I got to kick off work, and I've got to plan the next bit of work. Oh, and then I've got to do time today, and then I've also got a workshop that I have to go to with some crazy person that's going to talk to me about HOP, and and then I've also got to fill out all of this paperwork, all of this stuff that has to go along with that. I'm already here 30 minutes after when I was supposed to quit. When would you like for me to go do that thing?
Yeah.
I think of it as the old peas and carrots on the plate thing, right? Peas, carrots, and maybe some steak, which is what I'm far more interested in. But if we just keep pouring peas and carrots on the plate, eventually stuff starts pouring off the sides. And they are going to prioritize the things that are most valuable, most important to them at that moment.
Yeah.
And maybe going out and doing that pre-event something, it's not going to automatically be the priority because nothing's happened. Like I'm putting out a fire over here of something that's already happened, and I'm trying to deal with this supplier, and I'm trying to deal with that contractor, and I've got to go spend time with Bob because Bob, he's struggling to fill out his time card, and I got to teach Bob how to fill out time cards again for the 30th time. Man.
Yeah.
So senior leaders, the senior leader friends that are listening, if you want it to happen, you have to actually create a setting in which it can happen.
Yeah.
You got to give that person, whoever that is, that actual open time.
Yeah.
Open time to make it happen. You can't just say, do it. Because we know if I'm the leader and you say, do it, and you get all hot and excited about it, I'm going to do the stuff that really, I'm going to make sure my people are paid. I'm going to make sure that all the issues are managed. I'm going to make sure that I'm filling out all the compliance paperwork that the state folks are going to yell at me about if I don't get that done. And then that thing, you really want it, so I'm going to make it look like I did it. But I don't know that it's actually getting done all that much.
The senior leaders, how are you going to help them get off the hamster wheel?
How are you going to help them
safely and in enough time to get what you want done, and then allow them to get back on there, because they're great workers. They're going to get back on there. They're going to keep churning away and knocking out as many things as they can. But you've got to help facilitate that process.
Exactly. I think that there's a thing here that you have to say, right? That leaders are people too, and I don't know why I have to say this, but every company I go to, for some reason, every level of leadership, they are just people too.
Yeah.
Right. Set your leaders up for success. Carve out the time and space to give them the ability to be curious and be proactive and learn from normal work, no matter the tool that they're using. And if you create that environment, guess what? You're probably going to start seeing it. You're going to start seeing it happening, because I'm not going, oh my gosh, now I got to stay an hour extra because the vice president wants me to go talk to somebody with this stupid card deck about.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to set them up for success. That is something that I'm absolutely passionate about, because, as I said, I genuinely believe that our frontline leaders have, and some mid-level leaders, have some of the hardest jobs in our organizations. They've got frontline employees hanging off each legs, and directors and vice presidents hanging off each arm. Yeah. They're on the rack getting pulled in two different directions, and they got everything else on that hamster wheel we were just talking about that we're having to deal with.
Absolutely.
So you got to support them.
So before we jump into the sideshow questions and all, let me cover that second thing. This is something I think is really important for HOP practitioners, because I see us. I used to be one, so I can say us.
Yeah.
I can see us struggling, and we did struggle with this a lot in the past. So reflecting back on one of your latest podcasts about the HOP journey and going back to the basics and what that looks like, too many for large organizations that have a higher population. Let's say you're gonna start HOP training. Now, how are you going to get that done in a timely fashion? Right? What does scalability for large organizations look like? Because here's what normally happens. First of all, you're going to start putting together these classrooms.
Yeah.
And then you might be jamming those classrooms full of 40 to 50 to 60 people, which is not an adult learning environment. It is absolutely not. But you're cramming them through, trying to check the box, giving them information, and then you've got thousands of people in your organization, or let's just say hundreds. So how long is it going to take you to get through that entire cycle of people? And once you're done, now what? Yeah. How are you going to refresh them? Are you going to have to go through that whole cycle again and do that? So I would ask you to think about scalability and the use of effective and engaging online training, because this is the reason why we jumped on the bandwagon with Daniel Weidler. When we saw his video-based online training, it was not your mother's CBT.
Right.
It's not a talking head with the PowerPoint behind them. It's not a PowerPoint killed by death PowerPoint slideshow.
Yeah.
It is not stupid little animations. It's all video of work that is happening, and it's being narrated with text popping up on the screen.
Yeah.
It is all designed by the adult learner, so interactions are there every 6 minutes or so or whatever. And you cannot fast forward through it. Like so many things, you have to pay attention. You can set it up, and the interactions will, if you get the correct answers there, it'll let you continue. There's an exam you can put at the end of the courses or modules, or however you want to set it up, with a passing grade at what you set it at, and it's very effective. Yeah. Now, what does that do? That removes a couple of things. The logistical nightmare of trying to schedule people into classrooms. So many times there's shift workers, there's overtime that has to be paid, there's not enough room, and then again the duration. How long is it going to take you to get all these people through a classroom thing, right? So that goes away. The other dynamic and big challenge for large organizations is geography. Sometimes their organization is spread way out, so that bringing people into one locale is difficult at best.
Yeah.
So how do you help the remote worker that's way out there doing all kinds of different things? When you have effective online training that can be pulled up on your cell phone.
Yeah.
I mean, today's smartphones, any smartphone can run the course. Yeah. Any laptop, any iPad or pad that you have can do it. And everyone has some amount of flux time. in their schedule to where they could knock out a module. Normal modules maybe 20, 30 minutes tops.
Yeah.
Some are much smaller. Some of them are 10 minutes,
Yeah.
so that you can get through various courses. But when you're starting to think about large organizations, scalability is the key, because again, if you've got hundreds or thousands of people in your organization, it's going to take you a year to 18 months to get everybody through the course. How is that impacting your performance?
Yeah.
How is the HOP tools and techniques and fundamentals and concepts being applied when it's being dripped out so slowly through the organization?
Yeah.
We've had clients who've had 1,500 people on site. We've launched trigger training via, video-based training, and within a matter of 2 weeks, more than half of their people had completed it within 2 weeks. Within 4 weeks, they were done. 1,500 people in a month have the knowledge, and everybody's talking about it at the same time, and they're all there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, that is powerful. That's scalability, and that's the kind of things that we need to be thinking about for the future. And guess what? Thanks to COVID, it made us think about it.
All of a sudden, we realized that we could be kind of nimble with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
COVID happened, right?
It's funny because I still get clients who say, well, we want classroom training. And I said, well, now tell me why.
Yeah.
Well, because we want to make sure that there's engagement between the instructor and the person, and that we're giving personal message. I said, well, you can semi-customize your online training if you'd like. We'll do that for you. But I understand what they're trying to say there, and I understand that if they want to do that. But again, you're going to have to put up with all the logistical nightmares that come with you doing that in there, and we're happy to help them in any way they'd like.
I think what you see, right, is, for me, I think it's always a customized and hybrid approach to things, organization to organization. I'm sure we probably share that belief pretty strongly, that we have some framework that we know tends to work, but it's flexible, and it should be flexible. And we have some milestones where we know, you kind of sort of probably should be around here around this time if we're taking this approach, and based on the things that we tweak. Sure. I think that where I'm going with this is that I'd had a podcast with my friend Steve Scott not that long ago, and he had brought up this quote. I think the quote actually comes from the Toddster, from Todd Conklin. And the quote was, and I'm talking through just a human and organizational performance lens right now, not error-reducing tools or end-user tools or anything like that. The quote was that for every hour you spend talking to your frontline folks, you should spend at least 4 talking to your leaders.
Absolutely.
We're talking about laying groundwork, right? We're talking about laying groundwork here. Because if I'm talking as a HOP practitioner to leaders, the first thing that leaders want to do when we start talking about this operating philosophy, which is what we're truly talking about, better beliefs and assumptions, the first thing that comes into their mind is, okay, we need to go do this to our people. How do we get this all the way down to the front line? And I share with them the stories. I will, if you really, really desire, if you have this desire for me to go spend an hour doing 50 of these 1 hour long sessions throughout your organization to touch all of your front line employees, okay, there's probably some value in that for you. But I'll tell you that when I share basic HOP assumptions and beliefs with frontline employees, their response is, that's great and all, but crap, I've been telling you guys this for years. You need to go tell them that. And they're right.
Yeah.
They're right. So I think what I see is a really good hybrid approach, where, sure, I think like video and these online courses and these things can be extremely powerful as you spread the word through your organization. But if you're going to pay for someone, me or like you or anyone in this world that's doing this stuff, at least through the kind of operating philosophy side of this, the laying of the groundwork side of this, which is where many organizations should start. As we said at the beginning, you need to spend time talking to your leaders. I think that, for me, coming out, spending time with your leaders in person, that is highly valuable. But everything else, trying to spread that word, I'm with you. I think that we can, through a hybrid approach, make that far more efficient, far more cost efficient for organizations as well. It's just easier, right?
It is.
When you get into some of those things where what I tend to see happen is some mixture of hybrid online, I'm just going to use the word awareness, awareness training, right? As they first begin on this HOP journey, where they'll spread that far and wide and build some of the understanding. We're starting to build what we would refer to as a bit of HOP fluency, right? That we're starting to understand the language and the beliefs behind this. But then the majority of my time, I'm not spending it with the scaphologists or the mechanics
Right.
And maybe until we get into maybe facilitating some operational learning. And don't get me wrong, those folks are fun and all. Those are the folks I think I'd rather spend time with. No offense, leaders. But we're spending time in these interesting workshops with vice presidents and directors and managers and helping to really help them shape the direction of where this goes.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I'm with you. I think a good hybrid approach. I'm not the person that would tell you that it's in person or it doesn't work. I don't buy that. I don't buy that a bit, because I think, and this is just, I'm sure there's probably some interesting research out there on this. I mean, if there's not, someone that actually has a PhD should probably do it. I think the stuff that works outside of work works at work too. And I think we fool ourselves into thinking that when we get to work, it has to be starchy, stale, and dry. And when we get to work, people suddenly change the way that they absorb information. They no longer prefer TikTok or YouTube or Instagram. Now they want memos. You're right. I think so. The way that you describe this training, I think that's exactly it.
Yeah.
There's a reason why you and I both will probably at some point go look something up on YouTube today.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going, heck, I did that last week and I don't remember how to do that. Let me go look up how to change that stupid thing. Right? There's a reason.
I do that often.
It works well. YouTube you. Right? Right? There's a reason. There's a reason why we find interesting things on Instagram, or there's a reason why we go down the Wikipedia rabbit hole.
Well, I'll tell you, COVID made us rethink the way we are going to deliver training. And one of the hybrid approaches that people can use, and we've done this with clients, when we've given the video-based training, afterwards we would have either a remote webinar call with all the people that took it. Like we did an entire leadership team at one manufacturing facility. Gave them like 2 weeks to go through this like 4 or 5 little modules of a training course. Once they were done, we had a call. And then we put on remotely, on a question and answer session, and then gave a case study or two and kind of made sure we could fill in the dots and answer questions. So that's one way to do it. We've also done that hybrid approach in person. So after they've taken it, then we go in person and we sit with them in a classroom or in an auditorium, and we run through question and answers and get them engaged, have them do an exercise or two so that we can see if the the stickiness, right, of the learning. Is it there?
Yeah.
So, and by the way, scapologists happen to be some of my favorite people to watch.
I love them. I love them.
I thought I was the only one calling them that. Scapologist.
I love them because I ain't them. Because I could not do what they do for a living. When you watch somebody put up a hanging scaffold and they are running that ballet of material handoff, person to person chain, and you're watching the little positive material control twist, got it, move up. Yeah. And they're like up there hanging off of like a beam with like one arm, like completely tied off. Like, I'm sitting there going, I would have a panic attack on the first 3 steps up that beam. Like, there's no way I could do it. And that's there's a group of scaffold builders that I worked with, and in our worlds we tend to refer to them as carpenters a lot of times, right? Yeah, they're carpenters. Yeah. And I remember I went over to there. We had a very large group of carpenters, and it was a mixture of scaffold builders and carpenters. Right? Yeah. I'm going to say actual carpenters, and I'm going to say that because when I called the scaffold builders carpenters, they're like, you'd think that I cussed their mother. Yeah, but they're like we're not carpenters. Yeah. Damn it. We're scafologists.
That's right.
I gotcha. I'm with you. They're like, I don't build cabinets. I hang scaffold. I mean, those guys are great and all, but we're scaffold builders.
Yeah. That's funny. That is hilarious.
But I think where I would land on a bit of that conversation, what I would encourage folks to do as they're on this journey, is don't be afraid of getting creative with your approach. Yeah. Don't think that it has to be all in person or it sucks. Don't think it has to be all online or it sucks. You just laid out some really great different pathways of how you can take all of these tools, this treasure trove of tools that we have available to us, and you can combine those into a really bespoke approach to bringing human and organizational performance to life within your organization. You can map, as we said, it's not a program to manage, but you should have a bit of a plan. Yeah. Right. You should. There's some roadmaps out there, and you can kind of look at those things. But as you're thinking about that, make it customized to your organization. Yep, we're going to send out some online training, some really interesting online training through Ray and his group. And then we're going to spend some time with their senior leaders. And then we're going to bring all that back together where we're going to have some of these kind of open, kind of town hall, agendaless conversations where we're just going to kind of check and adjust and answer folks' questions and make sure that we're really embedding these concepts. And we're going to get operational learning up and going. Maybe we'll do a little bit of online learning with that, and we'll do some lunch and learns. And I think the biggest thing that I can encourage folks to do is don't approach these concepts with a normal change management mindset. There's some great principles and some great ideas there, and you should leverage those, but get creative. Don't be afraid to get creative. Don't be afraid to pull in some YouTube videos. Don't be afraid to pull in some of those great online trainings, and just approach it with that bit of creativity, and keep that in mind, that the stuff that works outside of work works at work too. If you can keep it interesting and, dare I say, even fun and not suck,
Yeah, right.
you can take this much faster than what you would assume that you could.
Yeah, basically, we're asking people to get out of their comfort zone. They're comfortable with in-person training, with classroom training. That's what they've always done. That's what we always like. But I'll tell you, and we'll help in whatever way they would like. Now, I've had clients ask me to come up and train trainers to deliver our materials. So they'll license the material from me, and I'll go up and I'll try to qualify and certify some trainers. And I tell them there's no promises here. You got to give me good people, to train. If they can train and deliver it in a classroom, then I'll certify them. I say, but if they can't, I'm going to tell you that they are not trainers, and you need to either find somebody else, or we'll have to take other measures. But here's the thing about trainers: every one of them is going to have a different message in the material, and not all of them are going to hit the relevant points every time. Why? Because people are fallible, and they're going to make mistakes. When you have online training that's already set, the message is consistent.
You built your baseline, right?
Yeah, everybody gets the same message. They all get the same points. Everybody gets so highly effective in that manner, as opposed to allowing the human element to come in and the class to drive the conversations wherever they want, versus getting the important concepts and all down. So you have to be careful about those things.
I think there's value in both, to your point. I think that's one of the huge benefits of online learning, is that, kind of as we said, you've got that baseline. You've got that baseline information sharing. Right? I think you can then probably couple that, as we were kind of saying, that everybody has a little bit of a different approach. Everybody kind of has their subject that they really want to spend time focused on, and they do. We're trainers. I mean, we think about the workshops that you and I both facilitate. I can't tell you that every single one of them's the same, and nor should they be. Right? They're all interesting and different in their own ways, because I think there is a power there. So I think you're right. You're onto something there, that you kind of set that baseline, and online learning, really good online learning, is a great way to set that baseline. And then from there, spending time in those in-person sessions, whether that's more of an agendaless, open-ended conversation, people are going to tell you the gaps they need filled in.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So they've got the baseline, and you told me that, but I don't quite. How does that work? Tell me more about that. I think when you pull those two things together, that's when it starts to get pretty interesting. I think what you're describing there too, which is a I would say a common model that a lot of us do. I encourage folks that you need your internal HOP champions. I call them bright spots. So, and that's a common term, bright spots. But I encourage folks to really put some thought into who those folks are before they get started. That's like prep work. When we're thinking about going down this path. And I encourage folks this sounds a bit woo-woo, Ray, but for folks to close their eyes, right, and think about those people in your organization that, whether they know it or not, are already kind of living and leading through these principles. They live there. They're already there. They might not know that it's HOP, and good. They don't know that it's called HOP. Right? Think about those folks, and then think about what those folks are great at. Not all those folks are going to be workshop trainers. Not all those folks are going to be facilitators of operational learning. Leverage their strengths and have them help you on that journey, so that when somebody like you or I or anybody else in between comes in, we can spend that extra time with them, getting them prepped up, because they become the face of HOP in that organization. They're the person that's there. We're not there all the time. They're the person that's there when the questions come in. They're not coming to me. They're coming to them.
Yeah.
And let's pack them full of great information, great ideas, and tools that they can use to help you lead HOP throughout your organization. So when it does come time for all those in-person things, I love coming and spending time.
That's the
But
time.
you've got other folks there too that can help you. You've got your own internal HOP people.
Yeah, and that's the time to tell stories.
That's
I
the
love
time.
telling stories,
Me
sharing
too.
experiences. I've got so many, man, over the years.
I have to tell people, Ray, and I'm sure you do too. It's just the nature of what we do. I think you got to love telling stories to do what we do, I think. And I tell people, by the time we get through one of these workshops, I'm like into my 10th story. I jokingly say, I promise. I told you the last one was the last one, but this one is the last one. But when I get done, it's just a joke, and people are like, "That's what makes it cool. Is like the real stories. Like it's not theory, right?" I think we both fall into that vein of practitioner, right? We both fall into that. Like I'm not just thinking about this stuff. We're in this world. We're doing this stuff. We've done it internally and externally, right? That's where the stories come from. Is the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. Figuring this stuff out. Well, so before I know I've kept you over. We're already over our time, so I hope that it's.
And I got time for you, Sam. I'm here.
Thank you. I genuinely thank you for being here. It's been some amazing conversation, and we're going to jump over into the sideshow here in just a second. And that one's real short, so I can give you back your Friday. I won't keep you squirreled away.
That's all right
for all of your Friday. But before we do that, let people know how they can get a hold of you. Let them know how they can find out more about Hope Consulting. I'm going to tell people to make sure that they follow you on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let them know about how they can find their book and anything else that's out there that you'd like to direct people towards.
Yeah, absolutely. You can certainly reach out to me via email. Ray is spelled R-E-Y at hopeconsultingllc.com. That's pretty easy. But I'll make sure I share contact information. I'll make sure I share a link to the book that we've been coaching to enhance performance book, along with I'll provide either a link or the PDF itself for the first 2 chapters of the book for people to download if they'd like to, if they're interested and want to get a feel for that. And what else did you ask me for? Contact information, links.
Yeah, anything else you want to chat about as far as people finding anything that they need from you guys?
Yeah, well, definitely connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
I'm there. You easily find me on LinkedIn. I'll share that link as well.
Yeah,
for you, so you'll have that.
And what I'll do is in the episode notes, as you share that, Ray, anybody that's listening, they can open those notes and scroll down and get all those links to all that stuff. I'll make sure we include your contact information there as well.
I'll be presenting at the IP Utility Conference that's coming up the second to the last week in October here in Dallas. So if you're familiar with IP Utility Magazine, it's a free magazine. It comes out. I've been working with Utility Business Media people for years now. The UBM folks are some great people. Who I started attending the conference and presenting and doing things, and later after I presented a few times, they asked me to become an instructor. So I've done some instruction, safety, leadership training for them and all, and we've just got a great relationship. I really love the folks there. They put on a phenomenal safety conference, and they have all kinds of great safety training and availability information. And so I'll be speaking at that, and I'm bringing clients there as well. So they can share some of their stories about the HOP journeys that they're on and what they've done. We're also going to put things in context of high reliability so that we can start exposing more people to high reliability organizing and high reliability operations. And once I'm done with that, the following week, I'm going to help out Vistra with their HOP fair, and I'm excited about that. They're doing a HOP fair on October 30th here in Dallas also. So that means I get to stay home for both of these.
There you go. That's good.
They're in my neighborhood, and
I love it.
That's the best kind, right?
Well, I love it. So I was literally, I didn't quite get there. For those that didn't hear this part, I completely set us up for failure this morning. I talk about an air trap, right? This is a great example of an air trap. I left. So when we schedule these through Google, and I'm sending these out through a Google Calendar, and then part of that. Well, now hold on, wait. Now Google's talking to me in the background on my TV. See if I can turn that off. There we go. Hold on. There we go. Let's turn that off. It's going to give me my full calendar of the day, which is interesting if people are interested in my normal 9 to 5 activities. But what I was going to say is we send these out, and part of that is it sends out, I'm not going to say the G word again, it sends out a meeting invite attached to that, right? Well, we're not using the big G word meetings. We're using a podcast studio provider, Riverside, which makes it a little bit easier for podcasting and all the cool stuff, right, that comes along with podcasting, like clips. And so then, yeah, Ray did what any normal person would do. Clicked on the meeting link. Instead of the meeting link that I strategically hid from him, deeper in the thing. So as I was sitting here, I'm like, I hope Ray's okay. I wonder if I'm also writing a post in the background, which I have yet to post on LinkedIn, because I've got one of those weird things coming up too. I'm going to be at the Arizona ASSP 2024. It's health and safety something. Yeah. And so it's always fun. That's cool because it's weird. You probably experience that quite a bit too, that I don't get to do it. I do some in my backyard, but most of what I do is not in my backyard. So it's nice when you get to stay home to do a couple local gigs.
Yeah. I'm excited.
Well, very cool, Ray. Thanks for being here, my friend. We'll jump over. So anybody that's interested in the next maybe 10 minutes that we'll talk with Ray, be sure to check out the Hop Nerd Sideshow. You can just look that up in any podcast, something, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can just check it out on the website. But
thank you, Sam, for this opportunity. I certainly enjoyed it, and always sharing with your listeners is a wonderful thing. So I'm glad I had this opportunity. Let's make sure we schedule something to talk about healthcare.
That's the plan. That's the plan.
Right.